Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 9 of Let's Talk Comics with me, Dattercant. And today, as I said before, we've been doing this for a couple of weeks now, and we've been looking at different first appearances over the past couple of weeks. We've looked at some of Marvel's and DC's Black Heroes. Hello, everybody, and welcome to. And now we looked at the X-Men. Um, we looked at Daredevil. Now we're looking back today at Mr. Kyle Rayner, Green Lantern in the mid 1990s, and we are looking at Green Lantern number 51. Now, you got to remember there's and now's probably the time to say it, comic book numberings. Comic book numberings are sometimes a little confusing. Because you've got numbers that started way back in the 1930s, as is the case with Superman and Batman. And they've been renumbered time and time again, and it happens in both Marvel and DC comics that once they've gone through so many numbers, they kind of forget a little bit of what the what is going on and what the numbers are, and it's daunting when you are in a oh, think about it. You're a new comic book reader, and you want to start a series, and you want to dive into a character, right? But then you go out to the newsstand and it says, well, you can read number 325. It's like, whoa. So that means there's 324 numbers before this one that I need to read to catch up. And believe me, having done something similar to that, you do not want to do it. Like I've told this before in other shows. I have tried to read some comic books from the very beginning. Yes, sir. From number one. I did it with Thor. I did it with Daredevil. I did it with the Avengers. I tried it with Batman and Superman, but that was way, way too much. Way far back with DC Comics, I decided to go back to Crisis on Infinite Earths in the 1985, and then um, start reading there. Not just um, because otherwise is it's overwhelming. It's too much, and comic book companies know this, and they want new readers not to feel intimidated when they come into a series when they're getting to know a character. So every now and again they'll renumber, and one of the numbers was Crisis on Infinite Earths in DC Comics. It's one of those things that when you're asked, when I'm asked frequently, so where should I start reading comic books? There's a couple jumping on points, and you have to ask, how far back do you want to go? And this usually people who have no idea or a very vague idea of how long comic books, comic book stories span, they will say, "Oh, from the beginning," and they're like, "No, you do not want to read 1,000 numbers of Action Comics or 1,000 numbers of Detective Comics, especially because you're not just going to be reading 1,000 comic books, that's not the point. I mean, 1,000 comic books, sure, it's a lot of comic books. It's 24,000 pages. It's going to take a couple of years, but you can't get the full story on 1,000 books. You need to get more than 1,000 books. You need to have the number twos, and you need to have Superman, for example. You need to have Action Comics, but you also need to have Superman. And later on, you're going to need Adventures of Superman, Superman the Man of Steel. So it gets, and then you're going to need a little bit of Justice League, and then JLA, and All Star Comics, and Earth's Mightiest Heroes, and it just gets way too complicated. So after Crisis on Infinite Earths, pretty much every DC Comics publication got renumbered back to number one. They will revert back to the longer numbers in some like Detective Comics and Action Comics um, for numbers 500 and 1000 and things like that. Same thing happened to Marvel with Thor. But for Green Lantern, which is the subject of today's show, we get the all new Green Lantern. And the all new Green Lantern, and you can't see, number 51, the all new Green Lantern, Mars, Banks, and Tanghal. And what we've got here, sorry that it moved, is somebody who is definitely not Hal Jordan. Now, you got to remember that right before the crisis, we had two Green Lanterns, or three Green Lanterns already. We had Hal Jordan, Guy Gardner, and John Stewart. John Stewart being DC Comics' first African American superhero. Now, on this, we get this guy on the cover, and that's not the Green Lantern costume. I mean, that's not how Green Lantern looks, or at least it's not how he looked the last time we checked. You know, and true, and that's part of the story because when we walk in, the first thing we see, and again, you got to remember everything is contextual, and there's a little undertone to everything that is being said. And one of the things that is definitely happening in Green Lantern here is they're giving it a more campy, sassy outlook. Um, the first splash page we get on Green Lantern number 51, which is the all new Green Lantern, is we see a black haired Green Lantern crashing through a window into the Silky Doll apparel section, ladies' lingerie section, basically, of some department store, probably. And he says, "My name's Kyle Rayner, and I've got no clue what I'm doing. Like, I don't honestly don't know what I'm doing." And yes, he doesn't. And he's going to go on to explain why. But there, he's dressed in uh, pretty much the traditional Hal Jordan costume. He's not in the costume he was in during in the cover. It's a brand new costume, and you're like, it's like, so wait a minute, is he? Isn't he? Which one is it? But as we march into the comic itself, we will get an explanation of what's happening. From there, we go into a double page spread with this guy talking to some form of cyborg alien-y thingy, and it's just all so confusing and weird at this point in time because we don't know what is happening here, right? We have absolutely no idea who Kyle Rayner is. This is the first time we've heard of him. This is the first time um, we've seen him, but he's wearing Hal Jordan's costume, getting it ripped, getting beat by a punk that if you've been following Green Lantern for a while, you're gonna go like, dude, just bash him over the head with something. You know, he's not that tough looking. He's not. Um, I mean, he's not one of the big hitters. He's kind of scrawny looking. But then, in the midst of this fight, Kyle says, "This is not working like I planned." And let me tell you what it is that I planned because this is definitely not it. And oops, you know, oops. What can I do? Mm, Now you got to remember, there's a lot of techniques that comic book publishers use for explanation and for exposition purposes. This is it. You know? Um. Uh. So he goes to his girlfriend Alex and tries to. We go back in time. And we have this guy, same guy, Kyle Rayner, but without the Green Lantern costume, just last night going to visit his girlfriend, who opens up. And as I said, this is a sassier version of Green Lantern. Um, Here we get a his girlfriend opens the door in a man's shirt. Nothing else apparently underneath, as we can see right here. And it's like she was sleeping on a double pocket man's shirt, which is pretty sassy in and of itself. So the other images, it is less serious. It's a little bit more, as I said before, it's campier. It's sassier. Uh, Now we can. I'm just letting you soak in the artwork as I type something here. I'm replying to an inbox message. Sorry about that. But he's like, so she's telling him like, look, dude, we're through. We broke up last week. I don't want you here. And he's going like, yeah, I get it. I just needed to talk to somebody, and you are the one I'm going to tell. And then he reveals to her that one of the Guardians of the Universe gave him Green Lantern's power ring, and he's now Green Lantern. And the first few issues, and I'm not going to go into all the details of this book, because this book, like most origin books, we already know who Green Lantern is. There's not a lot of explanation as to the background of what is a Green Lantern. We're assumed that we already know if we're reading number 51. Um, it's Like, here it is. He's Green Lantern. And then it's the new hero fights bad guy to test out his powers, and that's the whole story of the first appearance of Kyle Rayner. In the end, he ends up saving the day and saving his former girlfriend Alex, and she takes um pictures of him, and they kind of make up. But then he's like, "Yeah, I can't be wearing the same outfit that the old dude was wearing." So he changes into the outfit that we saw in the cover, and it's like, "What do you think?" And he's like, she's like, "Yeah, well, it's got possibilities. We'll see what happens. Don't get your hopes up." Now, one thing that is interesting to note here is how DC Comics is a little bit more involved with the real world this time. We have Alex in the background with shorts and a sweat and a jumper for the Oakland Raiders, right? So it's her football team, which is something that we very rarely get in DC Comics. Is It's these little connections to the real world, right? That is something that you will get a lot of in Marvel Comics, not so much in DC. DC will have its own teams, its own cities, its own places, just because of the way that the company developed. And you can't separate Batman from Gotham City. That's a given. You can't separate Superman from Metropolis, Flash from Central City, Green Arrow from Star City, the old Hal Jordan Green Lantern from Coast City. So seeing her in a Raiders outfit, it's pretty cool. Pretty cool indeed. But it is part of what DC's attempt at changing. Now, of course, they're setting things up, and the very last page of this comic book brings back one of Green Lantern's greatest foes, Mungul. Now, Mungul has one particular thing about him. He is yellow. His skin is yellow. And if you know anything about Green Lantern lore, you will know that Green Lantern's ring doesn't affect the color yellow. Right? So he's come looking for revenge against Kyle and against Superman. Now, next couple of issues of Green Lantern, we'll see him coming to grips with who he is and what's happening to him. Right? He doesn't know who he is. He fights Mongol for 2 episodes. Then he goes on to fight issues. Then he goes on to fight Major Force, and then we get to some of the Elseworlds stories. Then there's the Underworld Unleashed. But the real thing, the real kicker about Green Lantern is who he is. He is a down on his luck um, freelance artist who pretty much can't keep a job down. Um, he's he's always in trouble for some uh, reason or another, and he is madly in love with this girl who used to be his girlfriend. They'd broken up at the beginning, as I told you, but this entire romance in the air is part of the new definition of Green Lantern. After we've had, and if you've read any of the older Green Lanterns, you will know that um, Green Lantern's relationship with women wasn't very successful in the end. Um, but I'm not going to get derailed into that one. So this resetting of the Green Lantern persona as a more womany, um, like contemporary man is pretty interesting. And here we're looking at Green Lantern 54, and we see Alex DeWitt, Kyle Rayner's girlfriend, in nothing but her underwear, enticing him to, well, Mr. Green Lantern, you staying or not? And from the faces at the top of the page, we can see just what Kyle thinks of Alex in that outfit, and it's pretty funny. It was pretty funny to see. So yeah. Now, when we go back into the book itself, this episode will lead into Major Force killing Alex. Hmm. So they've been back for 3 issues, maybe, right? Uh, and he has fallen in love with her, and everything's working out beautifully. They're back. He's getting the hang of being a superhero, but in the midst of this, right, as he is dealing with an alien threat, um, as he's dealing with an alien threat in Alex's house, um, there's a knock at the door, and there's a flower delivery. And this is one of those things about the subtlety of certain comic book villains. This is Major Force as the delivery man going, I'm going to kill you. In the card for the flowers. So the flowers weren't really um from Kyle Rayner. They were a ruse by Major Force to get into the house and kill Alex. Now, this is this is uh pretty sweet what's happening in this story, because Green Lantern has traveled to the future, and um in the meantime Major Force is in the past, and we have this entire flashback of Major Four, mm, Major Force fighting with Alex. Alex making a brave stand, trying to defend herself, but then, unfortunately, of course, she's not strong enough. He kills her. And as he finishes choking her, he turns around, looks, and says, like, I'm hungry. And it's one of those strange things. And we have a switch panels to Green Lantern as he flies out, and he's super happy. He's smiling like, oh my God, I'm coming, Alex. You better be ready. And when he comes home to Alex's home, he's like, hey, where are you? And there's a note on top of the table. He unfolds the note, says, handwriting looks funny. Surprise for you in the fridge. Love, A. And guess who has been stuffed in the refrigerator? Alex's body is there. And it's sick. twisted, but that is going to mark uh, in Kyle Rayner's run as Green Lantern, and that will define the character. It's those things that mark them as they are. Um, but we get this huge fight with Green Lantern piercing Major Fours and bludgeoning him and getting ready to kill him when all of a sudden, as he's going to drive a sledgehammer into Major Force's head, the power rings energy goes out. And then Major Force gets up, beaten to a pulp by Kyle, ready to pounce on Kyle. But the importance of that issue is the death of Alex. That is what sets that issue apart. It's nothing else. Because just like the events at Coast City had a huge impact on Hal Jordan at the end, this entire issue and his whole relationship with Carol Ferris and her turning into Amethyst and all these weird things that happened with Carol Ferris, they had an impact on Hal Jordan. For Kyle Rayner, it's the same story. And this is going to be the defining event in his life. He is a down on his luck freelance artist whose life had just started to turn around and probably probably change for the better when everything goes back to hell again. And this coincides with one of DC Comics' 1990's events. Another attempt to correct the errors that they kind of made in the reboot of Crisis on Infinite Earths. After all, getting all of that universe that they had before to join together was very, very difficult. But they somehow managed. And this issue will lead into Zero Hour, which is a completely different story. And it's something that I will talk about maybe at some of the point in time. But in this issue, he meets Alan Scott, who is Green Lantern from Earth 2, who obviously kicks his butt. And we get into a whole explanation of what is happening with DC Comics multiverse, what is happening to the Green Lantern Corps, who they are. For the first time in Green Lantern number 55, 4 issues after being introduced, Kyle Rayner is finally getting some form of explanation as to what his role as Green Lantern has to be. And it's coming from Earth 2. Now, sorry for the bigger page. I just want to show you the entire splash page. And this is the point where Alan is explaining to Kyle what it means to be Green Lantern, what the legacy that he is inheriting is. And we've got some characters. We've got Carol Ferris in both personas. We've got Sinestro. We got Oliver Queen as Green Arrow. Dinah Lance is the Black Canary. We've got the Guardians of the Universe in the background. Hal Jordan, Abin Sur, the entire Green Lantern Corps. We've got, of course, everybody. We got Kilowog is in the background there. John Stewart in the forefront. And it's a lot of information to take, especially for a guy who just lost the love of his life. This is a recap. This is the explanation that's been missing for the people who started reading Green Lantern in number 51 and don't know what the hell is happening. But the best thing at the end is that we go back to some very weird times. I mean, you got to remember we're talking about the 90s. The 90s had their thing, and there were some mistakes were made. You know, things happened, and we had Superman with a mullet. Now, granted, there's people who say that it wasn't the mullet, and it's all up to the artist. And some of the renditions in the art, Superman has a mullet. In others, he doesn't. But in this one, um, he does. And he's like, this guy's been Green Lantern for a couple of days. He doesn't know anything about being Green Lantern or the Justice League or anything. And there he is with Superman right there. And not only is he talking to Superman, he's introduced to Metron, one of the new gods. Um, and this is the tie-in to Zero Hour, which is, as I said, the first of many events that will happen with DC Comics retconning or fixing somehow their their continuity, trying to plug in some of the gaps because I mean it was difficult if you think about it from the 1938 1928 sorry um, it was roughly 50 50 years of comic books that they needed to make fit, especially for the older ones, for the old guys like Superman and Batman, who had been around for quite some time. Well, there's a lot of backstory in there, and it's interesting. You got to remember that comic books are a continuation of the story. It's ongoing all the time, but that would lead to one of DC Comics' weirdest things. It's Zero Hour. And we get to Green Lantern number 0. It's not even Green Lantern number 1, it's Green Lantern number 0, where he gets to meet the deceased Hal Jordan, but he's not deceased anymore. He's alive, and it's it's complicated. It's complicated, and if you want to understand Zero Hour, you need to have read Emerald Twilight, but it fixes a few things. And then the numbering doesn't go back to Green Lantern number 1. That would be way too complicated right off the bat. It goes to Green Lantern number 56. So it continues. But throughout all this, we're seeing this Green Lantern alone, fighting himself, uh, fighting with the past and trying to come to terms and grips with the loss of Alex, which will eventually happen when he meets Donna Troy. And Donna Troy is going to be the rebound girl for for Kyle Rayner, for Green Lantern, and he meets her in Green Lantern number 70. That is an issue called Changes for Green Lantern, very aptly named. And as I said, this is going to involve a lot of things and the whole relationship with Donna. That is going to be a spot in Green Lantern's run. Now, as I said before, guys, I'm going to keep it short. So today we're going to be ending our stream here with the introduction of Donna Troy into Green Lantern's life. And just to close it off, there's one point here where Donna says to Kyle, I'm not going to be Alex. And then she realizes just how deeply, deeply hurt Kyle. Right? And we see how he's still hurting. And we have John Stewart as the guide. And he's been taking on the mantle of guide for Kyle. Now, there's a lot of conversations that take place between these two. And we will talk about them at a different episode when we look into a different story for Green Lantern. Um, but for now, ladies and gentlemen, that is all of the time that I have for today. Um, Thursday, very important. We will be looking at another first appearance from DC, another character from DC Comics. Most likely, if everything goes right, we will be looking at Wally West's appearance as the Flash. Just as we looked at Kyle Rayner, we're going to look at the 1990s Flash, which is Wally West, before he was portrayed in TV. So we'll see. We will see. We shall see what happens. But this has been Dadrican, guys, and I am out. We will be looking at Wally West's appearance as the Flash. Just as we looked at Kyle Rayner, we're going to look at the 1990s Flash, which is Wally West, before he was portrayed in TV. So we'll see. We will see. We shall see